Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mosaic International South Asian Film Festival 2020, our virtual MISAFF, and the Q&A for the short film program number 5, Self-Discovery. I'm Sally Rowlett, one of the short film programmers for this year's festival. MISAFF is presented by CCAI, and the festival is running until December 12th with a huge selection of outstanding films. Today, we have the opportunity to talk to filmmakers from the short film program Self-Discovery. This program is made up of 5 intimate, poetic, and thoughtful films centering around self-knowledge and exploration. The films in the program are The Lonely Prince by Shivan and Sunny Grover, Incognito by Saeed Dorani, Grace by Smarak Samarjit, Oru Single Room by Vishnu Dev, and Desire by Garima Kaul. Today with us we have Shivan and Sunny Grover of The Lonely Prince and Garima Kaul of Desire. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll start off with a kind of broad question. Can you start by telling me a bit about how the ideas for the films came to you? Why don't you start with Shivan and Sunny?
Hi, so I'm Shivan, that's Sunny.
Hello.
We wrote and directed The Lonely Prince. The idea for the film came about early last year when we decided to kind of create a story that could be passed down through generations in the queer community, or us as Indians would have a tale, like a period historical tale about a queer character finding his sexuality. That we could tell our children and then they could pass it on, and have us as a community would have a story to share and kind of bond over. It's like Indian culture has such a rich historic presence, and trying to find like a queer narrative in there was really fun. And then because it's been colonized and like kind of shunned into the way it has, we decided to kind of make a story that, you know, would liberate it, would kind of take those stigmas off it and just allow it to be for what it is. And yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Thank you. It definitely comes across as what you intended. And Garima, can you tell us a bit about Desire?
Right. So Desire is a collection of stories of individuals from the Indian asexual community. And I mean, what drew me to this project and to the story, to tell the story, was the fact that the asexual community sort of exists as a microcosm within the larger vortex of hypersexuality. You know, all human connections are tangled within this culture of sexuality, of hypersexuality. And these are individuals which are challenging the episteme of human sexuality just by the mere by their existence. And I mean, these are such powerful stories of their loves and their lives and their relationships, which are often stigmatized. Asexuals are, you know, a minority within a minority. So even within the LGBTQIA plus community, they're often, you know, ignored. And like I said, LGBTQIA plus, nobody reaches the A plus. It's often shortened to LGBTQ, and it's not just limited to the abbreviation or to the verbalization of the term. It is as such. I mean, it's present in the society as well. And here we had. So I knew somebody personally who identified as an asexual, a very good friend, and she told me her story. And you know, we were taught since childhood, even in school, in biology classes, that you know, humans are sexual beings. There is no two-way to that. There is no second side of the coin. It became important to me to sort of question that narrative through the stories of these people who talked about their struggles and their struggles with identity, more importantly, because I mean, as hard and long the fight of the entire LGBTQ community has been, there is still some representation. I mean, with in terms of asexuality, I feel that the struggle to identify and sort of occupy that space, even within the queer community, is still at large. And so you know, that. That jarring different distance between, you know, knowing the vocabulary or having the terminology and then identifying with it and then occupying that kind of space is sort of humongous. So I thought that, you know, it is important to kind of explore that deep chasm that has been created. And hence I met these wonderful people who told me their wonderful stories and allowed themselves to be vulnerable in front of the camera, and I was just drawn to that.
Thank you. That was incredibly well put. And I guess just to grow on that a bit, as you mentioned, and the topics that both of you cover can be such like an internal reflective concepts. How did you use the different tools in filmmaking to put that into your films and use art to express that? Start with you, Garima, this time.
Sure. Could you repeat your question, please?
Sure. Sorry. So how did you use the tools of cinema and filmmaking to express that the kind of the self-awareness and internal exploration in the topics that you cover?
Right. So I mean, it was important for me to sort of exhibit this narrative of intense hypersexuality, and I chose to do that through sexual imagery. I mean, you've seen the film. I sort of tried to create a contrast in terms of how hetero-cis humans, sexually active hetero-cis humans, associate every small thing. I mean, there are mental associations that are made with mundane, regular things, which become hypersexual in their heads. To sort of display that, to display, exhibit through the narrative this mental association, I used sexual imagery, which was a big part of the film, and you could call it fruit porn, if you will. And there are several other sort of images that I've used to showcase how uncomfortable this culture of, if I can call it toxic, I mean, culture of hypersexuality and sexualizing every other thing, and not just women, even objects, into this whole narrative of intense sexuality becomes so uncomfortable and not just uncomfortable, well, it's hard for them to associate themselves with that kind of narrative. So that was one. And in terms of self-discovery, which we're sort of discussing today, I realized that a big part of the LGBTQ narrative is identity, which I try to explore through the film. And one of the characters of the film chose to sort of appear anonymously. And she is a well-known face down south, I mean, in south of India. And she decided to sort of not reveal herself because of constraints relating to family and, her in-laws. And so, I mean, I struggled with ways to tell her story and to represent herself, and the idea of herself. And so while we were sort of discussing how to go about it, and I wanted to come up with a way that was comfortable for her, as well as would sort of help me tell her story, she came up with this brilliant idea, which I mean, I was sort of uncomfortable with it at first, because she suggested that she would use a veil, like a burqa, and she would wear a burqa and tell her story. And for a minute I thought about it, and I was like, is it appropriation? Because she's not from the community she's not from the Muslim community, which usually uses the burqa. And I sat with myself, and I sat with her, and we spoke about it for hours at length, and we tried to understand whether this would be appropriation or not. And then she essentially told me that this covering of my face is the only way that I'm going to find liberation in my story, and I'm going to be able to tell the story that I want to. And I think I should be given that opportunity. And well, I went ahead with it with a little skepticism, but also a lot of courage, and it sort of came out well. And so, I mean, in many ways, I understand that cinematic tools uh, a lot of times don't do justice to filmmakers who are exploring LGBTQ topics, because there are so many constraints in terms of identity, in terms of the kind of aesthetics you want to show, in terms of how would you show that internal fight cinematically. So I mean, yeah, these were the kind of things that happened with us while we were shooting for Desire.
Thank you. Well, you're very creative in showcasing everything on film, and yeah, the way you used food and showcasing how so many things are sexualized in our culture was very creative and quite comedic at points too. And very interesting to hear about this process to film the dancer. And Shivan and Sunny, can you talk a bit about how you used cinematic tools?
Yes, the hard part about writing a queer story is the internal struggle. Is how do you show it to people without without revealing too much, or without not saying enough. So I think in the writing process itself, we were trying to see how we can make this world like terrible for our main character. So we decided to keep him surrounded by only female guards, which was one which we wanted to show that it would be a heterosexual man's dream to have so many women around, and there's no other man in the world. But we can see that he's burdened by this pressure of masculinity that's shown by women. And the other way was we centered the theme of trying to physicalize his desires through sculptures, which in a non-period world, you have things like screens, you have newspapers, you have images, and in a period world, we used sculptures and painting and art, and trying to juxtapose his mood with the sexualization of these sculptures. And the third thing was probably my favorite is the use of dream sequences, which I'm a big sucker for. I always write at least one or two in there. Yeah, that was a main part is showing what the character is thinking, and showing like delving into his mind, and which happens at like the midpoint of our film, where the audience goes from being an outsider to really understand the character, and that was only because of our dream sequence. And yeah, and it was such a collaborative experience, because we had so many people on board with this film. It was not only like us and the cast and the crew, it was the presenters of the film who are great names in the queer community, and who helped us shape the narrative. And originally we had a darker ending where the prince loses it all. He doesn't get the liberation that he gets right now. And a dear friend of ours told us, like, is this what you want to tell kids who are going to watch this film? Like, this is your fate? And we're like, no, we didn't really think about it like that. So, like, I think 3 days before we shot it, was back to the drawing board, trying to figure out how do we end this film, calling the producers. Like, Shivan was our lead producer on this. And try to see, like, this is what we have. How do we make a climactic ending? And we just scraped together some stuff that we had laying around. And yeah, we were already on location at that point, and we just quickly wrote something, got everyone involved. Like, do you like it? They're like, yeah, this is much better. I'm like, okay, fine, let's just go shoot this then. And actually, that was like the second day of shoot. And on the first day, we were like, maybe this ending doesn't work. On the second day, we were shooting the ending. We're like, well, I guess it has to be what it is. And yeah, it was. I think it was very liberating experience as well. Writing a closed character, what I relate to a lot. It was like very therapeutic for me, and strange, very, very strange experience overall.
I think it's really interesting to kind of see just the difference in conversation between where Garima is coming from and versus like where we're coming from. Having to capture someone else's story and communicate that in the most authentic way, versus having to create a story and have that kind of have the same level of authenticity, which is so fun to kind of talk about and just hear her perspective on it, versus like the way we kind of came about. because from day one, our film had a feminine touch to it. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't a masculine film, where even though like both the main characters are men, to kind of find that thread between sexuality and what identity actually is and what it should be versus what it's meant to be and what we're told it should be. So like an Indian prince is, if you think about it, this like epitome of masculinity. You know, he's supposed to be like this big muscular guy with a big thick mustache holding really big swords, versus like in our film when you kind of look at him, he's this lost soul wandering through this empty palace almost like a ghost, which is what kind of was the most important thing for us. Was like, okay, this man who does not know who he is himself is not going to be a good ruler until he figures that out for himself. So what is his behavior going to be like? Where is he going to wander? Where is he going to spend most of his time? How is the camera going to float around him and have the same kind of isolation that he does in this world? So like even the film kind of getting a little geeky about it, but the film kind of transcends from really wide shots into close-ups as we kind of get more comfortable with him and his character, which is kind of fun for us to play with as filmmakers. And yeah, it kind of just built on the main thread that Sunny laid down for the story of this character who doesn't know who he is, gets an opportunity to find out, is reluctant about taking that opportunity, and then finally gives into his own desires and goes for it. So once we had that kind of structure, pulling from our own lives, you know, having gone through that struggle, it kind of just made it, our world was like, okay, how do we translate this in the most cinematic way possible, in the most immersive way to make sure that the audience is with us on this journey? That's kind of what we tried.
Thank you. Well, it is definitely interesting having both of you on here, because it's, yeah, being able to see how that's done through a bit more fantastical narrative perspective versus a documentary perspective. And now I have a question from the audience about short films, and it's, why are shorts such an important creative means, and how does it make its mark as an artistic pursuit? So I guess whoever wants to chime in on that first, go ahead.
I think shorts are a opportunity that the filmmaker most of the time makes for themselves, where you're not burdened by your executive producer, your second lead producer, your distribution, your you know, what are the fans going to think for this actor? Can you do this? Can you not do this? So it's definitely like one of the more liberating experiences in filmmaking. And I would also say it's more collaborative, because more often than not, we have very, very small budgets, and what we want to do with the budgets are like extraordinary, because you want to tell a feature-length story or something that you would feel in an hour and a half in 10, 15 minutes. And to get that across, you have to really, you know, is in the script writing stage, you have to, you know, beat down the script. You're like, this is what I can tell in 30 seconds, and I can't tell any more than this. And yeah, and it's definitely challenging, because the art of a short film is so different from the art of a feature film. And I think it's a good idea to go through what a short film feels like multiple times if you can, and then, you know, get in the big shoes and then go for your longer format.
Yeah, definitely. And Grima, did you want to talk about short films?
Yeah, well, I mean, he explained it pretty well. I do sort of agree with what he said, and in terms of structure, I feel you are sort of, if you're doing an independent shot, like you said, the budgets are small, but the possibilities are endless. You get to sort of explore your network. You get to build a stronger network, especially for indie filmmakers. Most of the things are sort of done for the love of cinema, and and you know, you get to experiment with the structure a lot. So that's something I would, you know, really recommend to people who want to sort of you know, experiment with the structure and the form of cinema, which can go either ways. But with a short, you're still sort of, you know, your bounds. But with a feature, I mean, if you start off with a feature, experimenting with a feature, that can go sort of haywire. So yeah, I feel like a short gives you a lot of shots give you a lot of opportunities to sort of experiment with the subject as well as with the format. And I mean I know a lot of brilliant projects which started off as shorts and then were sort of moved on to feature length films. And it's also a good if I can call it a show reel for that specific concept. It's also a good presentation if you want to sort of take it to a feature length. You say you have a big dream about a big feature, but you only have small budgets for a small short. So you make that short and then you take it forward and you show it to the right kind of people who help you make a feature out of it. I mean, at least that's how it works for indie filmmakers. So guess, yeah, I mean, that's a really good opportunity for most people.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely a opportunity for independent filmmakers to start creating their ideas. And now I'll ask the hot topic of the day. How has COVID affected you and or your filmmaking?
I think like in the beginning of the year, in January, in February, you were hoping that COVID isn't such a big thing. Like I think it's gonna like a pandemic. Like it's small, right? Pandemics aren't that big. So like the whole plan of like traveling and we would have gotten to meet you guys in person. Like that kind of like human connection isn't there anymore. But it's opened up like so many different things. Like you are in Canada, I am in India, and we're still having like this discussion. And I know like we have learned that the world is much smaller than we actually think. That we can connect like this. Like I'm working with people in America. I'm working in the day in India, and yeah, it's affected a lot of like the creative challenges. Like you can't have huge crews anymore, stuff like that. But also it's taught you how to be smart about it, like what is actually doable. And yeah, I think we've all been given this huge challenge, and filmmaking is everything. It's a challenge. How do you get your 10 shots in a day that you can only get 2, but you figured it out. You have to do it, and yeah, I think it's making us like soldiers right now. Like once we're out of this, we'll know how to work with smaller crews, smaller deadlines, smaller budgets, because everything's getting cut right now. And yeah, and I think I'm just grateful to be safe, to be working, to meet people like you, and expand my network, sitting at home very comfortably, and not having to travel. But yeah, it would be great if if next year you have MISAFF and we come meet you guys. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be lovely. We can all meet on the red carpet. And Garima, how has COVID affected you and or your family?
So, I mean, I feel that it has definitely reduced the gap between the virtual self and the real self. And that's something I think about a lot in terms of our virtual identity. And I feel that I mean that gap has definitely reduced. On top of that, I mean I would like uh, to personally to explore my offline self more, but I feel that because of COVID and everything has just gone virtual within the blink of an eye, it's been quite an adjustment for me. So I decided to take some time off. But in terms of filmmaking, of course, like these guys are saying, it has taught us a lot of lessons. It has taught us to sort of make do in what we have and to sort of soldier on, and also have given birth to a lot of new stories with the kind of time that we have to ourselves, with the kind of sort of proximity that we had to other people, which is reduced. I feel like it has sort of given us a lot of time to develop newer stories, more personal stories, and also to work with smaller teams and smaller budgets. So I feel, I mean, there are two sides to the coin, but let's hope that this ends soon. And we're able to sort of our film traveled to so many countries and so many continents, and I've just been sitting in one place and talking to people virtually. And I'd like to sort of have the opportunity to go out and travel and meet all of you guys and sort of sit on the same table and physically be able to see each other and talk to each other. And I feel that that's I mean that human connection is what keeps us going, and I hope that we're able to reinstate that sometime soon.
Yeah, that's so true. As much as technology is helpful so that we can stay in touch during this period, it's the blending of, as you said, yeah, the blending is definitely very odd, and it doesn't quite compare to actually having in-person human interaction. Yeah, hopefully we can all see each other in person sometime soon. And so for the final question, can you talk a bit about what's next for you, either now or, you know, what you plan on creating after pandemic?
Our goal is to take this project to a feature-length version of it. I think like it's such an exciting story for us personally, and it's visually and so enticing for what we plan to create with it. So that's our next step. We're also currently working on like a bunch of other projects. Thanks to the lockdown, we'd have time to kind of develop endlessly. So yeah, we're building a slate, and hopefully next year we'll bring you a feature film to be a part of this festival.
That would be great.
Good luck to you guys. So so part of the reason why I was pretty upset about not being able to travel was that I was to go to Kashmir, where I'm originally from, for some recce and also research. My next project is based in Kashmir. So we are hoping to explore memories, the idea of memories through stories that are passed on from one generation to the other. And I am a second generation migrant, second generation Kashmiri migrant, and my parents migrated from Kashmir to Delhi. And that's the story that I am hoping to tell in my next film. And well, you know, because of COVID, everything is sort of now put on hold in terms of physically being able to visit, but I'm still sort of visiting story. Well, it's a good exercise if you think about it in retrospect. I'm listening to stories and memories virtually and over the phone. But yeah, I hope to be able to go there soon and you know, put everything in place and get into action.
That sounds like it would be an incredibly interesting film. Can't wait to see it. And definitely, yeah, now it's, even though it's hard to travel or film, hearing those stories, I'm sure it's contributing to the eventual story of the film. Well, thank you all so much for joining, and for joining from around the world. One benefit of the technology is being able to do international Q&As. And thanks everyone on Facebook for joining this Q&A live. Remember, the festival goes on until December 12th, and there's Q&As for the rest of the week on Facebook. So watch the Shorts Program 5 if you haven't already. The amazing films in it, as you've heard about today, and watch all the other films at MISAFF, and have a good rest of your day.